Assalamualaikum and hi everyone, we are from Group 8 and are happy to present to you about the cultural dimensions of the United Arab Emirates. Enjoy!
The United Arab Emirates is a Middle Eastern country bordered by the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf. It is strategically located near the southern approaches to the Strait of Hormuz, a global crude oil transit route. The geography of the United Arab Emirates is made up of desert sand dunes in the west and mountains in the east. The United Arab Emirates of-state analysis is nearly equivalent to other Arab countries where Muslims play a significant part in people's life. This region's major characteristics are large power distance and uncertainty avoidance. This suggests that leaders are expected and accepted to distance themselves from the group and offer detailed orders. Individualism is the Arab Emirates' lowest of-state dimension when compared to the global average. As opposed to individualist culture, this translates into a collectivist society and is manifested in a deep long-term devotion to the member group. UAE is thought to be neither masculine nor feminine. It signifies that the society is motivated by concerns about achievement, success, and competitiveness. It also relies on dominant values to ensure a good life while caring for others.
For the next part, we are going to compare half-state cultural dimension and globe cultural dimension. As we all know, there are 9 globe cultural dimensions. First, UAE is a high uncertainty avoidance country. They are likely attempted to avoid uncertainty by relying on social norms, rituals, and bureaucratic routines to mitigate the unpredictability of future occurrence. Second, UAE is a high power distance country. The members of an organization or community accept and agree on unequal power distribution. Third, UAE is a high institutional collectivism country. This indicates collective resource allocation and collective action are favored in nations with strong institutional collectivism. Group loyalty is fostered even if it jeopardizes the achievement of individual interests. Fourth, UAE is a high in-group collectivism. Individuals identify with their families or organization and duties and obligations determine behaviors. A strong distinction is made between individuals who are in group and those who are not. Fifth, UAE is low gender egalitarianism country. This means in the country, women have lower status at work and in the culture. Sixth, UAE is high assertiveness country. It shows that UAE communication is straightforward and unambiguous. Individual initiative is encouraged and interpersonal connection are likely to be competitive. 7. UAE is a high future orientation country. They prioritize long-term investment over short-term consumption. It is related to people's capacity to postpone gratification. 8. UAE is a low performance orientation country. They do not prioritize materialism and competition and are likely to anticipate spending on training to increase performance. Lastly, UAE is a high human orientation country. This shows that individuals are accountable for encouraging the well-being of others as opposed to the state giving social and economic support.
For this part, I'll be sharing on the Trumpana analysis on the Society of United Arab Emirates and the organizational culture of globally known Emirates Airline. Trumpana's first dimension of culture is universalism versus particularism. In the United Arab Emirates, many of the citizens are regarded to be particularistic. Emirates Airline being a global airline company, on the other hand, they are universalistic. The second dimension in the Trumpana 7 dimension is the individualism versus communitarianism. United Arab Emirates similarly is viewed as an opposite to the individualist. It is particularly similar with Emirates Airline. Next is specific versus diffuse dimension. Going back to their Islamic beliefs, the society in the UAE is deemed to be diffuse as it teaches its believers to separate their prayers away from their worldly business. Same goes as in the Emirates Airline, as they tend to maintain a strict separation between an employee's personal and social lives. The fourth dimension is neutral versus effective. The culture of society in the United Arab Emirates and Emirates Airline both are categorized as neutral, though that the UAE and Emirates Airline are considered neutral. The basic of Islamic teaching is known to show emotions more often than the other culture. The fifth dimension is achievement versus ascription. UAE is considered to be one of the highly ascriptive society, whereas Emirates Airline is considered to be a more achievement dimensional. The sixth dimension in the entrepreneur cultural dimension is sequential time versus synchronous time. The society of United Arab Emirates is diffuse, hence it is considered synchronous in this dimension, whereas Emirates Airline is thought to be sequential, resulting in it becoming the world's top airline firm. Finally, the internal direction versus external direction. Having a selfish habit of manipulating the environment for own benefit is unethical for businesses. In contrast to the society of UAE, the Emirates Airline instills the external direction values amongst the employees and company.
Corporations must adapt their business and marketing tactics as well as their communication effort. Local culture, which consists of the belief and tradition of a country, typically determines and impact purchase decision. Because of the significant influence of culture, companies like Emirates Airline frequently customize their advertisement and program. Emirates Group is a multinational airline with a base in Dubai that serves 154 airports in 82 countries. Identity, power, gender, uncertainty, and times are the 5 key aspects according to Hofstede. Power distance is the first value dimension. Power distance refers to the intensity and degree of disparity that exists between people. Emirates Airline has a low power distance culture. Individualism versus collectivism is the second value dimension. This is related to the nature of a company's job assignment and activities. Emirates Airline corporate culture strikes a decent mix between individuality and collectivism. Masculinity versus femininity is the third value dimension. Mas. This refers to how the organization job obligation and responsibility has been assigned to men and women. Emirates Airline has a low mass score. Next is the Uncertainty Avoidance Index, UAI. Organizations with a high level UAI tend to have a more controlling mindset. Meanwhile, the culture of Emirates Airline is a cross between two with a bias for lower UAI ratings. Finally, long-term versus short-term orientation. Emirates Airline works with a long-term perspective in its strategic emphasis and development, although execution and associated operations are generally driven by a short-term orientation.
Thank you, and that is all from us today. Hope you enjoyed our video. Assalamualaikum and goodbye.